Okay, so out of sample optimization, what is OOS or out of sample optimization? This method most often used in neural network or regression studies. Okay, we do not but cover these particular methods, but they are more useful with other data series. They can be used in market analysis, and some people, such as Lou Mendelson, claim to have successfully been able to correlate markets using neural network patterns. However, for purposes of the study of optimization, we ignore neural networks, multiple regressions, and other factors such as expert systems and artificial intelligence. Instead, we focus on the most common and productive methods, those by majority of the system designers. One variation of OOS that is commonly used to take the entry price data series to be optimized and divided into sections of 70 to 80%, being the ICE data include 20 to 30% being the OOS data. So this is the out of sample data, right? And this is include the first small portion of the total period and the last or just the last most recent data. Okay, and you are going to use this, and in this you are going to do all of the studies so that you can be able to identify how does that work. This method optimizes the in sample data and tests it on the out of the sample data. The out of sample results are theoretically what the system should expect in real time, right? Because obviously the data which will be in the future in the real time which you will be taking, in that there won't be any sort of automation which is done, right? Invariably, the out of sample performance will be considerably less than the performance generated in the optimization. If the out of sample results are unsatisfactory, the method can be repeated with different parameters, more but the more that the out of sample results are used as the determinant of parameter sets, the more that the objectivity of optimization is compromised and closer to curve fitting the process becomes. Eventually, if continued in this manner, the out of the sample data becomes the same as the sample data, and the optimization is just curve fitting. One other method of reducing the effect of curve fitting is use more than one market as the out of sample test. It is difficult to have same parameters set in different markets and at same time curve fit. This appears counterintuitive because most analysts would think that each market is different, right? So obviously, a reliable system should work in most markets and not just one particular market. So that was OOS, and now let's also see what is walk forward optimization. Now, this walk forward optimization is also an OOS method, okay, and it roughly uses the same price data series as the one described previously. Although there are many variations of this method, the most common procedure is to optimize a small portion of data and then test it on a small period of subsequent data. For example, daily data over a year is optimized and then tested on the following 6 months' data. The resulting parameters of this test are recorded in another year's data is optimized. This time, the in sample data includes the earlier OOS data plus 6 months earlier is data. Okay, so you are taking the earlier data and the plus data as well, right? And then um, you are going to record the results of both. The results from all recordings are analyzed for consistency, profit, and risk. If some parameter set during the walk forward process suddenly changes, the system is unlikely to work in the future. The final decision of parameter sets is determined from the list of the test results. Okay. Optimization and screening for parameters. We look next at all the different summaries and ratios that a system designer considers in measuring robustness. Alright, so but first we must mention those that are used to screen out better systems during optimization. When optimization is conducted on price series, the results will show a number of different parameters sets, a number of results from each parameter set. We can look at the net profit, the maximum drawdown, and any other statistics which are shown. They look at average net profit per trade to see if it generates trade, and we are going to also see what the maximum drawdown is, what is the capital loss, and what kind of stop losses are happening in the trade, and all of that have to be basically measured. Now let's measure system results for robustness. When analyzing a system, we look at the system components, the profit, the risk, and the smoothness of the equity curve. We want to know how robust our results are. Robustness simply means how strong and healthy our results are. It refers to how well our results will hold up to the changing market conditions. It is important that our system continues to perform well when the market changes, because although markets tend and patterns tend to repeat, the future market conditions might, be very different from what we actually saw in the past. So we never know what might happen in the future, right? Components. The most important aspect of optimization and testing process is to be sure that all the calculations are correct. That sounds simple, but it is surprisingly how often this is overlooked, and computer program errors have led to improper calculations. The next aspect is to be sure that the number of trades is large enough to make the result significant. The rule of thumb is between 30 to 50 trades, with more 50 being the ideal. We have mentioned previously that the comparisons between in sample and out of sample results should differ in performance, but not materially differ from the trades, right? So, you need to know that there should be some sort of the parameter stability which is also there. Now let's talk about the profit measures. Remember that the point of practicing technical analysis is to make money. Obviously, that's the whole point of it, and which is why we are even looking for good systems which will basically work. So talking about total profit to total loss. This is what is known as profit factor. We already know that profit factor is the ratio between the total profit and the total loss, right? So this is one very important thing to use for the system of optimization. So it must be above 1.0, or the system is losing, and preferably above 2.0. A high number suggests greater profits, right? But you also need to know that if it's an overly high number, then that should be something which is basically on some unusual type of information. Talking about outlier adjusted profit. Outlier adjusted profit to loss is a profit factor that has been adjusted for the largest profit. Sometimes the system will generate a large profit or loss that is an anomaly. If the profit factor is reduced by this anomaly and ends up 1.0, the system is bust because it depends solely on one large profit, right? So if there is one particular trade would give an unusually large profit, so that is something which should be avoided, right? Because then that is going to be an outlier, something which does not happen very frequently. So the largest winning trade should not exceed 40 to 50% of the total profit, because in that case it is an outlier. Then what is the percentage winning trades? Percentage winning trade is obviously we use it on makeup of risk of ruin. The more winning trades are, the less chance of run of losses against the position. In trend following system, the percentage is only 30 to 50%. Most systems should look for a winning rate which is greater than 60%. Okay. Annualized rate of return is used relating systems against a benchmark. The payoff ratio. Payoff ratio is the calculation that is used in the risk of ruin estimate. It is the ratio of average winning trade to the average losing trade. Okay, and it should be over 2. So, what is the payoff ratio? Payoff ratio is the average winning rate ratio to the average losing trade. The length of the average winning trade. So, the length of the average winning trade to average losing trade should be greater than 1, right? What is the efficiency factor? Efficiency factor is again the one sec. Yeah, it is the net profit divided by the gross profit. So efficiency factor, whenever they ask an MCQ on efficiency factor, you should know that it is the net profit divided by the gross factor, gross profit. So net profit divided by the gross profit will give you the efficiency factor. And the payoff ratio is basically the winning trade to average of losing trade. For a system to be robust, we should see a sudden dip in profit measures. Okay. So what is the risk measures? Risk measures what happens if you find a system that has extraordinarily high profit measures. Chances are your system has like a lot of risk. High profits are good, but we must balance them against an increased risk. So let's talk about major ways that analysts will measure the risk. The maximum cumulative drawdown. So what is the maximum cumulative drawdown? That is basically how much maximum loss have you taken in a continuous manner, right? That is what is maximum cumulative drawdown. Now what is MAR? We know what MAR is. MAR is net profit to the maximum drawdown, right? Net profit to the maximum drawdown which happened. And you need to know that this is also called as the recovery ratio. Recovery ratio is nothing but it is also the MAR ratio, and MAR ratio is basically the profit is basically the net profit percent, right? Net profit divided by the biggest maximum drawdown. Maximum consecutive losses must also be something which you need to basically take into account. Large losses, longest flat time, which means that what is a flat time? Which means either you have no trade at all or either it is sideways. The time to recovery. So whenever there is a big loss, you need to see how much time does it take to for the loss to be recovered. Maximum favorable and adverse excursion, right? Just think about it. Okay, then we have components efficiency factor. Efficiency factor is net profit divided by gross profit. Where were we? Yeah. So now let's talk about the Sharpie ratio. You know what Sharpie ratio is? You know, we take into account the T-bill returns, right? So what is the ratio of excess return, right? Portfolio return minus the T-bill return, and then you divided by the standard deviation of the return, right? And that will basically be the Sharpe ratio. Then we have retracement ratio. So what is the return retracement ratio? Return retracement ratio is an average annualized compounded return divided by MR. So maximum of either decline from prior equity peak, that or worst low from any point. Average annualized compounded return divided by the MR. What is Sterling ratio? This is arithmetic average of annual net profit divided by annualized maximum drawdown. So gain to pain ratio. So annual net profit divided by the annual net loss is going to give you the Sterling ratio, and it is usually done on a period of 3 years. Then you have maximum loss, the worst possible loss, and Sortino ratio. What is Sortino ratio? This is similar to Sharpe ratio, but it considers only downside volatility. It is calculated as the ratio of the monthly expected return minus the risk-free rate to the standard deviation of the negative returns. Okay, so basically the monthly expected returns minus the risk-free return, right? And then standard deviation only on the negative side. Smoothness of equity and the equity curve. Some analysts prefer graphic and visual manner. So they basically use the equity curve and the underwater curve. So these are the two curves which you can use to see the performance. Okay. Now let's do the rest of the pages. Give me a second. Yeah, equity curve. So this is the equity curve which is given. This is the equity curve underwater, and this is how it looks. Okay. This is the underwater equity curve, though we know what it is, and that's the underwater curve. So this is how they look. This is the equity curve. All right. Now let's see what is a good trading system. A good trader system has more than 13% annually, small number of robust rules, able to trade multiple markets, good risk control, and it is fully mechanical, which means that emotions are something which is not going to be a major factor in the particular trading system. So, throughout this book, we have looked at a number of technical indicators to guide our buying and selling of securities in reaction to particular market conditions. In this chapter, we turned our attention to mechanizing these reactions. A model is simply a plan or set of rules when to buy the or sell the securities. Okay, so that's it with this chapter. I hope you understood this chapter.